Hello there. Oh, am I? Yes, I'm on.
Yeah, it's just taking a while for my audio to connect.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Yeah, oh, it's so good to be here. This is so it's soul food.
Well, it's good to hear. That's good to hear because
Yeah,
it's it's been a long stretch since people have been actually getting to interact. So, yeah, it's good.
yeah,
I got new glasses, so I can see you all now.
nice.
Yes. I was telling my students in my day classes that, when you get to be my age, you have the glasses for the sewing and the glasses for the computer and the glasses for the driving and so yes. So wow, I can see.
It's a it's a wardrobe of glasses.
Yeah, what's really frustrating about having to wear a mask is I can't wear any of my sunglasses because they all fog up.
Yeah.
So I have a considerable collection of sunglasses that I have been collecting since the mid 80s. And they're all just gathering dust right now.
Soon.
I got my first shot today. I'm so happy.
Good.
I was thinking, okay, I figured, okay, it's going to happen when it happens. But one of my students at FIT contacted me and said, "Would you like to get the vaccine?" I said, "You qualify as an educator." And so she connect another student, Charles. This was Sandra. Sandra emailed me, and Charles works at one of these places that gives the vaccine. And so she said, would you like that? I said, yes, please. So yes, this morning at 9 o'clock, there I was, bright and early, had my little Band-Aid on and everything. So like, it's, I was talking to Susan Calgi about it, and it feels like, okay, light at the end of the tunnel. This has been a long slog. Okay. It's like, I can see it. Yes. So I'm actually making a pair of summer jeans to kind of, I hope springs eternal that I might actually go somewhere this summer. I might be able to. So,
well, congratulations.
Yes. Well, congratulations. Yes. Oh, dear God.
Where did you end up going?
I went this morning. It was a place up in Harlem.
Okay.
One of my students, and see, this is something I tell my students at FIT, because Sandra was a student of mine at FIT, but Sandra works in what I would refer to as the deep state at FIT. She's kind of one of those people who keeps things running and knows everybody. And if you need this, then she can connect you to that person or this person over here. And I've always liked her. She reminds me of Queen Latifah. And she, over the years, she has kind of saved my bacon in a number of instances. So yeah, she texted me a couple days ago and said, do you want to? I said, yes, I would. And so she contacted another student of mine, Charles, who worked in this place. And he's one of the managers there. So he said, bring your FIT ID so that, you can show it. But yeah, it's good. So I'm heaving a big sigh of relief today that, okay, April 6th is my second shot, and okay, I will show up bright and early, April 6th.
So which one did you get, the Moderna or the Pfizer?
The Moderna. Yeah.
I got the Moderna.
Okay, I did too.
Remember, you have 2 weeks after that second shot for your immunity to really get going.
Yeah. Well, I'm proceeding as I, with the mask and the whole bit. I'm going to proceed, because really, I don't want to be one of those jerks that walk around without my mask, like, I got a vaccine. I just think that's kind of bad form. So, I just,
I hoped you would say that, but I'm very happy to hear it.
Doing the same.
Also, the after effects of second Moderna can be tricky. Although the older you are, the less they are.
So my
got really sick and I didn't.
Yeah, so both of my parents got their second shot at the same time. My dad was fine. My mother was in bed for a day.
Yeah.
You know,
The day after,
I have seen.
the day after I was miserable, but nothing that Tylenol won't cure. And then the day after that, it was like nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So tomorrow you may, well, not tomorrow, because this was your first one, but the second
First
one. Last week, I was suffering the effects of the second one. And so, but
Well, I will happily suffer the effects of the second
Yeah.
one, just
Yeah.
because I've
worth
talked to a
it.
few people who are saying, well, I'm not going to get the vaccine. Are you? I'm like, yes, I am. As
Oh.
soon as I can elbow my way to the front of the line, you betcha I am. Because, because one of the things I was explaining to this person was, okay, I have friends who cannot take the vaccine because of their, different health things.
Status.
And so part of my job is to take the vaccine to protect them. People are like, really? I'm like, yes. That's, and see, also, I remember polio. I was very, very, this is one of my earliest memories. When I was a kid, I remember my parents taking us to this, it was this big room. It was like a gymnasium, and it was like all these people, and there were tables. And I remember it was this little cup with this like, and I just remember my mother standing over me. It wasn't a sugar cube.
I
It
got
was,
the sugar cube.
yeah, some people.
Yeah, so there were three versions.
Yeah,
Sounds like you
but
got the
just
second one.
I remember my mother standing there like, drink it. And I was, like, okay, just, hold your nose and knock it back, because, anything to get my mother to not bear down. So, yeah, and I remember how, later, the grown-ups talking about how relieving, this is because they had to worry about that every summer. So, yes. So anyway, okay. So there we are. It is a little after 12, so I think we can begin. So kind of where we're going today, we constructed the collar. So now we're at the point where we need some top stitching. So the first video is going to be a little sort of musings on top stitching, different things to talk about, because the top stitching I'm using on this coat that I'm working on might be a lot different than what you're going to be using. So after the top stitching, then we're going to go into setting up the welt pocket, because the welt pocket on this is going to be like, it seems like crazy, but when you see, it'd be two classes, because part of the setup, how I do this particular welt pocket, I had an article in Threads years ago on it, and when you see it, it'll make sense. But in this particular, actually, I'll just go get the coat because I have it right here. See, it's starting to look like a coat. But there we are. There is the welt pocket. Now you really have to look, because it is a pattern. You really have to look to find the seam. And so on a solid color fabric, it's not such a big deal. But if you're trying to match a pattern, it is. If you get that welt pocket on just a little bit off, and the pattern is a little bit off, I know for me, it would bug me. So the setup on this is really important. Next week, I'll show you, okay, once we have the welt and the pocket unit set up, then next week is installing it into the garment. Okay. So that's kind of where we're going this week and next. So before we start with the videos, do I have any questions, comments, requests?
I have a question.
What? Yes.
I have a question. How long are we going to have access to the videos?
Okay, the Zoom videos 6 weeks after the class ends.
Okay.
But the YouTube videos are going to live, like just the videos themselves, those are going to live on YouTube for the foreseeable future. Because I just, it's easier to just download them. What I would say is, don't pass these links around, because you pay for them.
No,
I'm just a little far behind, and I don't want to be in panic mode.
Yeah, well, don't panic. Because see, also, you can email me questions too. If you're kind of stuck, it's like, okay, where do I go from here? That's fair. Email me questions. Okay. So now,
thank you.
Maureen, I saw that you had a question.
yes, question on the collar. When you
Yes.
did the pad stitching and you
Mhm.
went from the corner
Yes.
up to the center back. Did you
Yes.
include the center back, or did you stop there and turn around and go back to the front?
I did them in 2 different halves. You know,
Okay.
I had to stitch to the center back. So I worked the 2 different halves. You could work it all the way around if you wish.
Okay, okay.
So, you know, both the net effect is the same.
I think really I was concerned on whether or not it should include the center back.
Well, you
On
you
the
want to
top.
get that, you know, it's not going to kill you if you skip the center back because that's, you know, not all that wide. You
Right.
just want to meld the layers together, the canvas and the undercollar. So
Okay.
if the stitching breaks a little bit in the center back, that's not going to kill you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So other questions?
I have a question that will show how far behind I am. I was trying to draw my front facing and my front lining last night because I thought that'll be easy. I'll just do that before bed. And then I made myself crazy because I couldn't remember. What's the hem allowance on your front? You know, where that little jog?
Yeah.
So does that change, or am I making this
Does.
hard?
Yeah, actually, so what happens is you have the 1/2 inch seam allowance on the facing up to, let's say the facing ends here, but I like the hem allowance to get a little wider before the facing, so that when you turn everything right side out, the hem allowance will hide behind the edge of the facing. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, but just so I'm sure, what is the hem allowance on the original pattern?
Inch and a
Inch and a half. Okay. All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
So other
Do
questions?
you mind, would you just repeat what you just said about it getting a little bit wider? I just want you to repeat your words so I can hear it
Okay.
again.
So on the front of the jacket and the facing, the seam allowance down the edge is 1/2 inch. The seam allowance across and on the facing is 1/2 inch, but the seam allowance on the body, let's just say this is the edge of the facing. The seam allowance is going to get wider, about 1 inch or so inside. So the seam allowance will go from 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches on this side of the facing, so that when you turn the face, well, actually, let me get the jacket again. So when you turn the facing right side out, see the 1.5 inch hem allowance stops right about there.
Yes.
My finger is.
Okay.
And then it goes back to a 1/2 inch seam allowance from here over.
So it's just underneath, it ends up living underneath that facing where that
That's
transition takes place.
Yeah, because I'll peel this back. You want a little bit extra.
Right.
And you can see it kind of ends there. So
Yeah,
see,
no, the
later-
visual is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, because later after we put the lining on, we're gonna slip stitch this little bias strip to here to close everything. I mean, that's a little further down the road, but this is what it's gonna look like. Actually, my friend is coming for a fitting on Wednesday, and she's so excited.
It's beautiful.
She should be. It's beautiful.
Well,
She should be thrilled.
It's so funny. She said, "Can I have a label?" And I said, "Yeah, you can," because I do think that's fair. So, okay. So, other questions? Okay. So the first one is not a long video, but this is kind of musings on top stitching. So we will begin. There we are. Okay, and let's put that there. There. Okay, let's go. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. I'd like to take a few minutes for a top stitch tutorial. These here are samples of different kinds of top stitching. So I will be outlining them shortly, but I wanted to just point them out. So beginning over on our left, this is top stitching thread with single threads, just the regular top stitching you have in your machine. The next one to it is top stitching where we have 2 threads in the needle. We can either put the 2 threads in the needle, or we can use what's called a double-eyed needle, which you'll get to see in a moment. Moving on. This is what I call my top stitching machine. This is sewn with buttonhole thread or top stitch thread on the needle and on the bobbin. And I will talk about how you achieve that particular look. Then there's also hand sewing. These are 3 examples. The first one here is what's called a saddle stitch, which is basically a running stitch. Next to it is a hand pick stitch. And finally, the big finish is one that is called a chain stitch. This is a thread embroidery stitch, and I'm using a thread called ribbon floss. So we have all of these examples here, which I'm going to show you how to do. We have a lot to work on, so let's get busy. We will start the lesson on top stitching with a sample. This is roughly 4 inches. This is roughly 7 inches. I've sewn it together. So this could be the front of a jacket. This could be your collar. This could be really any kind of edge. But I think having this particular sample and then progressing from there so you can see the different examples of top stitching is the way to go. The first example I'm going to show you is just a straight from the machine top stitch. Now you notice here I have used disappearing chalk. And I have marked the chalk line 3/4 of an inch from the edge. That is a personal preference, but that is what I'm going to be using in this particular lesson. So first, let's go to the machine and see just a regular top stitch. For the standard top stitch, you could either use your regular presser foot or you could use the walking foot. Since this fabric is thick and a little bit spongy, I'm choosing to use the walking foot. So obviously I'm using contrasting thread so you can see what I'm up to. But as a rule, for tailoring, you want a longer top stitch rather than a shorter one. It looks better. It also, if you have a shorter top stitch, it could gather the fabric. It kind of compresses it this way and you can have puckers. So I'm sewing at a 4.0 stitch. So this is what it looks like before pressing. I will go to the pressing table, give it a press, and bring it back here. After pressing, which makes the chalk disappear, here you have just a standard top stitch. Entirely respectable, but there are others. The next option for top stitching is having 2 threads threaded through your needle. Now, I would recommend you look at your machine's owner's manual to see how you do this. On the Bernina, you have 1 going through the final thread guide. You have 1 outside of it to keep them from getting tangled. The stitch length, again, is standard 4.5. Let's just sew this. You can see the difference. You could make this stitch a little longer if you wish. The general rule here is the longer the stitch, the better it reads. That's just something to keep in mind. Show you the result. Now let me go over to the pressing table and press this out, and I will bring it back so you can see the finished stitching. My assistant reminded me of needles that you can use if you're using 2 threads through 1 needle. It's called a double-eyed needle. It's fun to to know these things. I don't see them very often, but as you can see, it is a needle with two eyes. So if you can't make two threads in your needle work, my assistant says, try this one. So there you have the finished stitching. Now, just to compare to the last one, just so you can see, it's a subtle difference, but important. It's good to know both. You can use both. So these are two machine top stitches. This is where my assistant says that not all machines are equal. This particular machine is called a Singer 301A. And for top stitching, as much as I adore my Bernina, it does not like top stitching thread. So what you want to do is you want to use a top stitching needle. And the Singer 301A, also the featherweight does the same thing. You can actually put the buttonhole thread or top stitching thread in the needle and in the bobbin, and you make a top stitch that looks the same from both sides. Allow me to demonstrate. And see this thread. I set this on the longest stitch that the machine will make. I find that that's quite attractive. And let me just let it rip and show you what. You don't have the walking clip, but you can get a walking clip to this. Look at that. Is that not beautiful?
Nice.
Turn it
Is
over.
it? Yeah. Love
And it
this
looks the
machine.
same from both sides. I will go steam this out and bring it back and show you the result. So here we are. Is that not a thing of beauty? So as they say, sometimes old school is better. And in this particular case, one of these old Singers is just the ticket. So if you have one hanging around your workroom, you're all good. You can, some machines will accept the buttonhole thread or the top stitching thread in the needle and the bobbin. Some won't. It's good to have an alternative. For the hand stitching, we're going to wind buttonhole thread or Mara 30 onto the bobbin and have that in the bobbin case. Get this into the bobbin. I will install this into the machine and we will proceed. Now that we have the buttonhole thread in the bobbin, the next thing we want to do is loosen the top tension. It doesn't have to be completely loose, but you want the threads to drop down below the surface of the fabric. The white thread is the buttonhole thread. I'm setting the stitch length on the longest stitch, and then I'm going to sew right next to where I want the top stitch. The top stitches will fall on the chalk line. You don't want to sew through the stitching you're putting down now. This is just a guide. So here, this is what it looks like from this side, and turning the work over, you can see the orange thread. What that means is that the bobbin thread is tighter than the top thread, which is looser. This will make it so that it's so easy to get this stitching out after you've sewn your hand stitches. This is the setup for the pick stitch and the saddle stitch. I would leave the top in. And
Was that a question or just an exclamation?
Exclamation, yeah.
I think we're just excited.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you like that. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is, because what we're really doing is this is a marking device. And having the top thread looser than the bobbin thread
the bobbin thread pulls out quite easily after you have sewn your hand stitching. After everything is sewn, we'll take out the machine basting and then steam to get rid of the marks. So what I'm using this machine marking with the bobbin thread, is a couple of hand stitches. The first one is the saddle stitch. So what you can do is you can use the stitch length. You can choose 1 stitch, you can choose 2 stitches, and you can enter and exit the fabric on those 2 stitches. Now you see I've used embroidery floss here. I'm using all 6 plies just so it reads. So what I would recommend is make a sample before you actually do this. And so you can see I'm coming out right on, and you can have it exactly on. And going back to the other side. Now this here, what this will create is something that reads well from both sides. So that's something to think about. If you want to use this on something like a collar, having something that reads from both sides is a little better. So I will sew a couple more. And then I will take it off camera and give it a steam and bring it back. That's where we are so far. I will meet you back here in just a moment. And here we are. We have steamed the marks out. Now, the reason I loosened the upper tension was so that the upper thread would sit below the fabric. So this is where I come in and clip a few times. And then you can just take this thread out like so. Don't try to pull it all out at once. I don't think it works quite as well, but clipping it in a few places is going to allow you to remove the thread easily. Go back here. Got a little hiccup here, but that's okay. There we are. So now we turn it over and grab the thread like so. Now I will go back and give it another little bit of steam to get rid of all of those marks on the fabric, and I will bring it back here. And here we have the result. Perfectly spaced saddle stitching. On the front, that is on the reverse. Ain't it beautiful? Next, pick stitching. For the next one, which is the pick stitch, I'm using 4 plies instead of 6. And again, we're going to use the stitches as our spacing, but the pick stitch is a little tiny back stitch. So I'm going back about 1 millimeter and forward 2 stitches. And that again, you would make a sample and decide what spacing that you wanted on this. Now this is not something that reads as well from the back, but it's considered a respectable finish. So a couple more, then I'll show you the result. It's actually quite pretty. If you use an embroidery floss that has a little bit of sheen that matches the fabric, it's quite beautiful. So there is how it appears on the front. There's how it appears on the back. Again, not as pretty as the saddle stitch, but if you match the thread and keep the collar down, no problem. I will go off camera and finish the rest of this row and bring it back here. So here is the result. And I'm going to take the stitches out before I press this time to save a step.
Kenneth, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I think I missed something. So when you're putting that loosened stitch that you're taking out right now, you did
Yes.
that in your Bernina, right?
Yes.
No.
So in your so in your bobbin, what kind of thread did you put in? Because it seems like it's thicker thread to me.
It is. It's called a Mara 30 Gutermann.
Oh, okay. So it is the thread you suggested that we get, the buttonhole
Yes.
stitch, buttonhole
Yes.
thread.
And it can be any color. I just, I put white in there for clarity, but yeah. And so, I mean, you could use just regular thread, but I like the Mara 30 because it's a little easier to take out when you're removing the marking.
So in your Bernina, you had no problem with that.
No, no. See, what I think what the deal is with the Bernina is that the clearances for the hook are so tight that the Mara 30 is too thick for it, because my mechanic has said, oh, you're just not keeping it clean or whatever, but no. So I just know that it works in the bobbin, but it doesn't like it in the needle.
Okay, so you put regular thread in the needle where you put the Mara 30 in the bobbin.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Buttonhole thread, top stitching thread in the bobbin. And then we take this out. So that's what it looks like before steaming. And I will bring it back afterwards to show you the finished product. And here we are. Pick stitching. So you have two options here in the hand stitching for top stitches. Saddle stitch, and you have the pick stitch. It is up to you as the designer which one you'd like to use. What I have decided to use for the top stitching on the garment I'm working on right now is called ribbon floss. It is a fancy thread woven on the bias in rayon. It's kind of shiny. I've decided I want to make a chain stitch, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. So you anchor your thread, and again, using your stitch length as your guide, I'm using 3 stitches here. 3 stitches, and then you cast the thread over the needle. And you just continue. You come back, go back in where the needle emerged. And so 3 stitches. And it doesn't matter whether you cast the thread right to left, left to right, doesn't really matter. Just be consistent. And so yes, we're catching both layers of fabric. So you're going to see this from the reverse. Now you'll see what that looks like in a few minutes. And you'll notice that it's kind of springy. It's rayon. It seems to have a life of its own. But for something that has a high texture, this really does the trick. So this is a chain stitch. And if you really want to, what you could do is just sew the machine stitch in the matching color and sew this chain stitch over it. And that chain stitch, or the machine stitch, would disappear. So you really don't need to, if you don't want to, take this chain stitch, or take the machine stitch out. I'm getting my terms confused. So I will go off camera and sew down to the end, because there's a way of securing that end. So I'm at the end here. I'm going to stop my stitch. So you bring thread over the needle again, and then you stitch down into the fabric. You want to tie that last loop down in place, because if you just let it hang out, the whole thing will unravel. This is a chain stitch. Then you would secure it on the back. And I like to bury the end of the thread here. So this is how it looks. I will go off camera and unravel all of the machine basting and steam it and bring it back here so you can enjoy. And here we have the results. Now, when you're using this, you want to make sure to consider which direction the stitch sews in, because as you can see, it is kind of a one-directional stitch. This is what it looks like from the back, but if you're working on a highly textured fabric, that really shouldn't show. So there you have it, the chain stitch with ribbon floss. So, questions?
Ken, if you said to pay attention to the direction of the stitch, so if
Yeah.
you're doing it on a collar, would you do it from the center in opposite directions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, it looks a little weird if it's facing this way and facing this way. So yeah, that's actually a very good question.
Yeah.
Okay, other question.
Kenneth,
Yes.
it's Julie. Where do you put the disappearing chalk?
Oh, it's here. Let me get the box here. Colonial Tailor's chalk.
Okay.
Now there are two kinds. There's the quick and the slow. I like the slow
Okay.
because the thing is with this, if you mark the fabric, it can sit for 168 hours without disappearing, as they say. I have learned though that when you're working, if it's raining out, how I know this is I had marked, it was a jacket that had 900 beads, step and repeat pattern. And I'd marked the whole thing and I had it sewn about halfway and I thought, I'm going to go to lunch. And it was raining out and I got back and the marks were gone. So it depends upon, it's moisture that makes it disappear. So get the slow one. You have a little more, longevity. And really what I like about it is you just hit it with a little steam. It's not like a wax chalk, because if you mark wool with a wax chalk, it kind of disappears. But if you're going to mark something like a silk, if you mark a silk with a wax chalk, it leaves an oil stain. But this, it just vanishes. It causes no trouble. I've used it for years and years and years. The thing you might want to be aware of is that if you're using a lot of it, for me anyway, it makes me sneeze. But I mean, that's a small price to pay for not having to clean oil spots off of silk. But it's quite a good chalk. And see, this is one of those things, like if you have sewing friends, because I think this is like 36 pieces. I mean, that's your lifetime supply. So, it's like 3 of you could throw in and, buy it and get 12 pieces each. And, you'll have plenty of chalk. It's like a clay chalk. So if you drop it, it breaks and you have to sharpen it. And some people say, well, I have to sharpen it. Like you have to sharpen a pencil too. So yeah, that's the chalk. It's a good one.
Great, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so next is the welt pocket. Now this is, I'm starting from the pattern because you have the little welt guide that is included in the pattern, and that is what we're going to be starting with. It shows you your grain line. And so I like starting with making the pattern, because if you understand how to make the welt pattern, you can make any shape of welt pattern as long as it has angles. Because what we're essentially doing is mitering, but you'll see that when we get to the video. But so before we turn on the video, any other questions? Okay then, so back to the videos. Top stitch, preparing the welts. Okay. Let's see, where are we here? Oh, where's the preparing the welt? Okay. I know it's here. I saw it earlier. One moment, please. Ah, here we are. There. These are the welts for the welt pocket. And the instructions that follow will show us how to make this. But let me show you a little something here. This is the face, but when you turn it over, if you really look carefully, there is a seam here, and it's hidden by the fabric, but you can see, there it is. There is a seam here. So there's not a seam on this end and not a seam on this end. The beauty of this particular construction is that you have 3 folded edges and no additional thickness here and here. To achieve this, it first starts with the pattern. And that's what we'll start with, drafting the pattern for the welt. Before we make the welt pocket, though, we need to make the pattern. I like to show this because it's useful to know how to make the pattern for any shape of welt. This is, I think it's called a quadrilateral or a quadrangle. It's 4-sided. This is the welt guide that we're going to be using. You can see this points up. This line is what will sew the welt into the body of the garment. And you can see there's the grain line. So what I have done is I have copied this on fresh paper. So I have the up direction, I have the grain line here. And so now we're going to make the pattern. A little explanation. When you have one of these patterns, generally there's a fold here and then a seam on this end and on this end. That's all well and good, but I think that it's a little too thick on the ends. So I'm going to show you how to pivot these end seams to the back. So as you can see, I have copied this on fresh paper, and let me just label this. This is the face or the front. The other side is going to be the back. So our first step is fold paper on this fold line. So that's a fold here. And then we want to cut this out. And with some tape these ends closed. One end tape closed, the other end tape closed. Let's get rid of that there. Okay. So this is the front. This would be the back. So what we want to do is we're going to pivot these ends. We're going to create a seam here and here. So this is like a little handbag. The easiest way to figure out how to place your seam, you're just going to fold. That fold will be a line. And then this fold will be a line. So when you're making this pattern, the thing to know is that the lines start at the cut edge and go towards the corners. So now from here, I'm just going to label, this is for navigation. These two are points A. That's going to be B at the corner. And then C and D. So these I will use to navigate through the construction. At this point, you want to cut one layer. I know it seems obvious, but I've had people cut both. So we cut C to D and from A to B. Lay this out flat here is that's what the pattern looks like. And just to have the lines, I'm going to draw a line there, a line here. So there we are. That is the pattern. We're not going to add seam allowances. We're going to do that in the construction of the garment. So here's the pattern. Next, cutting out the materials. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a moment to see if there are any questions.
So is that fainter line in the, it's kind of diagonal, is that your grain line?
That's the grain line.
Okay.
And so when when you're working, you will want to keep that that's part of the information you'll transfer later when we put this on organza, which is our next step. And also I like the little arrow and up because I get confused. So because otherwise, if I don't mark it like I'm going to be stricken with amnesia at any moment, I will be stricken with amnesia and get them in upside down, which is very annoying. Okay. Okay, so we will continue.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure. Yes, ma'am.
When you say up, does that mean that the welt is going to be pointing towards the center front?
Well, no, up means it points towards the shoulders.
Towards the shoulders. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So because this welt is a little more of it's on an angle, but it tilts more towards vertical. So that's that.
Okay.
So that's up towards the shoulders. Okay.
Thank you.
I have one
Okay.
more question.
Yeah.
Can you fold that back to, oh, you don't have it. You probably don't have it.
Run it
I just realized I
backwards.
was looking at this video. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is does the AB line, do the A and C points, are those arbitrary or?
Those are fairly arbitrary. If
Okay.
you remember, I folded this edge to match the folded edge at the top just to get a fold line. But as long
Right.
as you have the lines that start on the cut edge and end up at a corner, you're fine. It will work exactly the same.
Okay.
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 So yeah, other questions? Okay, then. Off and add seam allowances. We're going to do that in the construction of the garment. So here's the pattern. Next, cutting out the materials. First, we mark the silk organza. Now notice I'm laying the organza on top of the pattern. It's much easier. And I'll pin it in a few places. Now, the fold should be parallel with either the lengthwise grain or the crosswise grain. The silk organza doesn't have to be on the same grain as the main body. The main body grain line, that's really just for the fashion fabric itself, not for the understructure. So now what I will do, and this is one of those times you can use a Sharpie, it's allowed. Some people clutch their pearls and see that I'm using a Sharpie, but it's considered legitimate. We want to transfer all of this information onto the organza. So here I have all of the information transferred to the organza. What I will do next off camera is to flip the pattern over to get the piece for the opposite side. And I will bring that back once I'm finished. So here I have both pocket pieces. We have mirror images here. So then the next step is going to be taking the pattern piece, holding it closed, because we're going to be using this to cut the interfacing. There we go, better. This we'll use to cut our canvas. So I will go get some canvas and bring it back here. Here is a scrap of our canvas, and I'm going to put this long line, this is the fold line, on the lengthwise grain.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What canvas is that? Do you know the name of it?
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. You see, I'm really terrible about getting names of things. I just point my finger.
Okay.
But this, yeah. I got this at this place called G&R when it was still in business. Sadly, they're gone now.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Both at the same time. And really, there we are.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you say you cut it on the straight of the grain or the cross grain?
The I like it on the straight grain so that the straight grain is parallel with the top fold. The reason for this is that you don't want that top edge to stretch. So having that on the lengthwise grain ensures that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And finally, what I like to do, since we're going to have a fold on this edge, and this edge, I want to shave off 1/8 of an inch on that fold there, along the top edge. You want this canvas to be slightly smaller than the welt so that it doesn't create a bind inside of the welt at the end. Now we have 2 mirror images. Next, we apply this to the organza. I've worked ahead and pinned one of the pieces of the canvas down. So really what you're doing here is you want to line the lower edge up with this lower edge here, and you want to make it so that this is centered all the way around. You'll see about 1/8 of an inch outside these cut edges of the canvas, and that's as it should be. So what I will do is I will go over to the machine and sew through the canvas and the organza with a serpentine stitch. You could use a zigzag stitch, but we're just going to sew this together. No mystery there, so I will bring back the finished product. So here this is what we have. This is just a serpentine stitch. You could use a zigzag, or if you don't have a zigzag stitch, you could just sew with 2 rows of straight stitching. This is just holding the canvas to the organza. This will be the side that goes against the face fabric, but we'll cover that in a moment. Now that we have the 2 welt unit support structures, next we go to the coat itself. Before I begin, what I like to do is to use a stay tape. You could use seams grate, you could use any other kind of fusible stay tape to stay the armhole, the neck, and the front edge of the jacket front. You can see here we have our tailor tacks, we have our center fronts. So this is preparation that you want to do before you address the working with the fronts, so that you don't end up distorting anything. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this away and move this in. So what I've done here to kind of explain, you can see that this fabric has sort of a subtle vertical stripe. I'll zoom in just for a moment. The horizontal stripe isn't that pronounced. It's really the vertical that I'm concerned about. So what I want to do when I install the welt, I want the grain of the welt to match the grain of the fabric. So what I've done here, this is just a thread tracing up one of the stripes so I can see what I'm doing. And I also made a line of thread between this tailor tack and this tailor tack. Now in my example, maybe in yours too, the pocket welt ends up a little shorter than this, so you align it with the top tailor tack.
Oh, okay.
Here we are.
Just
So
something
here
to know.
is this. Now the canvas is underneath because the face fabric is going to be on top. But what I want to do is I want to see where the placement of that line is. So if you're wanting to match a pattern or a stripe, this is really the way to do it. And that's one of the advantages of using the organza, is you can draw the stripe on the organza so that when you lay it out onto the fabric, you can get a good match. So what I'm going to do here we are. That is going to be the line for the stripe. I will do this on the other side as well, but I'm going to work with this half for this particular example. So once we have this and we have the other one marked, we're going to go to the fabric to get the fabric onto the welts.
So I'm going to stop here for a moment. Does this make sense what I'm doing here? And see, the beauty of this is, say, if you were matching a floral, you could do the same thing. You could draw the flowers on the organza so that when you put this unit onto when you put the face fabric onto this unit, you can actually get a dead-on match of a floral so that
Oh, okay.
together.
Yeah.
So whether it's a plaid or stripe or whatever, having, putting your pockets in this way guarantees that everything is going to match when you set the welts in. Okay.
So if you had a plaid, would you do a vertical line and a horizontal line?
Absolutely. Yes. And as I remember, I think at some point I had a horizontal line put in too, but yeah, it's, you just draw whatever information you need onto this organza so that when you put it to the back of the face fabric to match it to the body, so the welt matches the body, it will then actually match dead on when you put it onto the coat. Okay.
Thank you.
Kenneth, did
Yep.
you put a long running stitch matching the grain of the fabric as well as the long stitch matching the edge of the welt underneath?
Yes. So there are
Okay.
two there's one long stitch for the opening, so I know exactly where that is. And then
Yeah.
I have this one here is the one that is the stripe on the fabric, so I know where that is as well.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
so we'll continue.
Oh, okay.
So to refresh, this line here equals this line here. So now what we want to do, put this aside, I have another piece of fabric, and we want to pick out a line on this that we transfer to the back. So I'm going to put a pin right there. So you can see there is a line going up. So to begin, I'm going to anchor the thread here. So then the object here is long stitches underneath, short stitches on top, because we want this, we want to see this grain line from the back. Now, if you were working with a fabric that was not block fused, where you could see the actual grain of the fabric of the pattern, you may not have to do such a deep dive, but it's good to know how to do this just in case both sides of the fabric don't look the same. Because again, we want the grain line of the welt on the face fabric to match the fronts. So short stitch here, show you what it produces here. It produces a longer stitch on the back that we can see. So I will go off camera and finish this and bring it back and show you the result. So here you can see I have a lengthwise grain and a crosswise grain marked, because it does have a subtle little bit of crosswise grain. What I've done here on the organza, I compared it to the face fabric, and there, that is where a crosswise grain will hit. So what I will do here is I will line up, there we are, line up the lengthwise grain and crosswise grain. So I've lined up this, and we can just pin here and here. So we've lined up lengthwise grain, crosswise grain, so that when this shows on the body, it will be correct. Next, we're going to sew the organza to the face fabric. Our next step is to sew outside these lines. Don't sew on this side of the line, sew outside. See, these are the lines where the welt will fold. We want the stitches to land on the inside. So this is a single thread, and it really is just a tiny little stitch. I'm using a contrasting thread, obviously, for demonstration purposes, but if you sew it correctly, it really won't show. Show you this here, as you can see, like I said, outside that line.
Please tell me you sped up your video, right? You don't sew that
Yes, I
fast.
did. Yeah, I don't sew that fast. No,
I was
just
about to say that. I was like, please, for the love of God, tell us.
I'm just gonna quit sewing now.
I sew quickly, but not that quickly. Yeah, it does look kind of cartoonish. Almost done. There we go.
I'm expecting like some yakety sax and like music in the background.
Yeah. Secure the thread. Yeah, that's the beauty of iMovie. You can do things like that. I'm just going to pin that there. Pin that there. Turn this over. First off, I'll show you. This is what it should look like on the back. And now notice you don't have any real show through on the front. So those stitches just barely catch the fabric. You just want to hang the canvas by the organza. Now next we're going to go over to the sewing machine and sew a machine stitch across the bottom so all 4 sides of this quadrangle are anchored. So here, we're just going to sew on that line. Just to anchor. Just want to anchor it down like so. And there we have it. So that is what we just sewed. So now we take this back to the work table and we're going to pin the ends. So any questions so far? See, what we're going to be doing next is sewing the miters. So we have all of this kind of nailed down so that the canvas will not move. Now this is where the letters come in. I've remarked the letters on this one. So we're going to match point A to point A, and we're going to sew from A to B. What that looks like. Put the pin in A, fold right sides together, and bring the pin out on point A. So we have an in on point A, out on point A. We pin, then we pin based from A to B. So we just want to make sure that those 2 lines are pinned to each other. Now I will go over to the machine. I'm going to start at A, back tack, and sew down to B and back tack, and I'll bring it back and show you the result. As you can see here, started at A, stitch down to B, and back tack. So from here, we want point C with point C. Just match these 2, make sure they're nice and smooth. So point C with point C, point C, and then we pin based between C and D. And again, start the stitching at C, back tack, sew down to D, and back tack. So I will bring back the results. So here we have sewn from C to D. Now, we're going to trim the seam allowances to 1/4 inch, and then just take that off to get rid of it. 1/4 inch. Now here, make a clip 90 degrees to the stitching line right at the end. And we'll do the same thing. A to B, trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch, and then get rid of the rest of this. And that's a little oopsie right there. That's not going to kill you. to give you an idea, a little preview of where this is going. See, that is how the seams will go on the back. Next, pressing. So any questions to this point? We're all good? Is everyone's eyes rolling back in their head?
No, I just feel like if this was on a VHS tape, I would have worn out this section of it by the end of the class. It'd be all stretched out.
But that's the beauty of it. You can run it back as many times as you want.
That's the beauty
This
of
is one of
digital.
those things that after you've done 2 or 3 of these, then you don't even think about it anymore.
Wow,
I promise.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
First, we press the seams as sewn, and then on the point presser, I'm going to open up the seams. Okay, now something to see here. So you have these 2 90-degree cut edges. You're going to overlap the 2 fabrics. And by overlapping them, later on we'll reduce the bulk, but that's just going to make your life easier. So then here, same thing. You want to press the seam open. And these 2 overlap as well. Now let me
For
give
the overlap, Kenneth, is that the top one or the front over the, like which one's bottom most?
kind of either or, because what you're going to do later is cut up between them so that you get rid of all of the excess, and you'll have 2 cut edges sitting edge to edge.
So it's like
it
a
doesn't
butted
matter.
seam, or?
Yeah, it'll be in the seam allowance, but yeah, the 2 cut edges will sit right next to each other at the end. So you don't have to worry about which one goes over the other one. Okay? Okay, so moving right along. See how, there we are. See how this seam allowance goes that way and this one goes over that way. We're going to reduce the bulk later, but I just wanted to show you that up close. Next, we turn everything right side out. So I've turned everything right side out. So now we want that to sit under there and this to sit over. And same here, we want that seam allowance to go that way and that to sit over. And now, this is face down, we are going to press and there we are. Finally, to close the welt, where is it? There we are. There's your machine stitch that we sewed earlier. I'm going to sew through all the layers on that stitch again, and then I will meet you back at the work table. So here we are. You can see there's the machine stitching. And you can see we've sewn through all the layers. Now you can get rid of the basting. It has served its purpose, and we're done. So here is our welt. The next stop is going to be top stitching.
Oh.
If you choose to use top stitching, which I'm choosing to do, this is the time to do it. So as you can see here, I have chosen ribbon floss in a chain stitch for the collar and the cuff latches. So it stands. I use the same ribbon floss for the two pocket welts. Next, we're going to prepare the pocket welt to add to the pocket bag. Before we add the welt to the pocket, we need to trim this seam allowance down to 3/8 of an inch. Easy to do. This 3/8 of an inch is going to come in handy. There we have the two welts. Next, the pockets. Here is the pocket bag with the welt attached. This is face side up, and the welt, as you can see, is sewn to the pocket, face side up. So now, let me talk about what happens here and how we get there. This is the pocket bag, face side up, and you can see I pressed a crease. And really how you do that is you just line all the edges up, press that crease, open it up face side up. So from here, this is the welt, cut edge stitching line. We will line up the cut edge and center it on the pocket. So again, cut edge is on the crease, and pin it down in a couple of places. This is where I like to check myself before I go any further to make sure that I have one for each side. You just want to look and make sure that this one faces this way and this one faces this way. I get dyslexic, so I have to check these things. So we will take this over to the sewing machine and sew the welt to the pocket. I'll meet you at the machine. So here is the stitching. What we want to do with the needle is we want to lower the needle. See how the needle bumps up against the edge of the welt right on that stitching line? That is what you're looking for. Because to start this, we're going to start with an extremely short stitch, a 0.5. And we want the beginning and the end of the stitching to be right at the edge of the welt, no further out. Stitch for about 3/8 of an inch. Then lengthen the stitch to 2.5, just the standard default length. And you're going to sew again right on that stitching line till about 3/4 of an inch from the end. And then again, watch this, shorten that stitch to 0.5. So you're going to sew till the first time that needle falls off the edge. It's better to be a little too short here rather than a little too long, because if it's a little too long, when you install the pocket, you're going to have a gap at each end. So there. we will go back to the work table. We have one final step before we install these pockets into the jacket. You can see here, there's the stitching line. We want to, now you don't cut through the pocket bag, but you want to cut an angle here and another steep angle here. Now there is about a 1/16 of an inch or about 1.5 millimeters between the short stitches and the edge of the fabric. I'm going to pull out here a little bit because what you're creating, if you look at the shape of that seam allowance, you know, the stitching line from here down to here and up, this cut edge is going to be your stitching guide in the next step when we install these into the coat. So what we've done here, we have prepared the pocket welts and the pocket bags. In our next lesson, we're going to install the pockets into the coat. Okay, so questions? Are you all glazed over at this point?
Thank heavens for the video.
Well, you know, one of the things that I've really kind of seen the value of in this whole COVID thing is like being able with the phone. You know, I can see, because see, when I take my photos for my articles for Threads magazine, you know, this is something I've done for years and years. I know what I need to see if I were on the other side of it. And so this is, you know, I'm able to take that a step further and show you, of course, now sewing through the iPhone is a bit of a challenge sometimes. And there are times I look at my manicure and I just think, oh, I try so hard, but it always looks like 10 miles of rough road. But, you know, forgive me on that. But yeah, and see, the beauty of this then is, you know, you get the link, you can run it back and forth as many times as you, and I would encourage you to kind of watch it a couple, 3 times before you actually jump in and start cutting fabric, because then you have a little more of a sense of how it goes. You know, looking at it this time, it's like looking at the, you know, it's not a learning curve, it's a learning cliff, and you're at the bottom going, oh, how am I going to get there? But after you've made 2 or 3 of these, what I love about this particular method is it's flat on all 3 edges, so it's a nice flat welt. And next week when we install it, I've never had one fail. Every single pocket since I figured this technique out, 100 years ago, it always turns out right every time. And when it's all said and done, for me, that's the gold standard. If you can put those pockets in and not sweat and not think, oh my God, I might have to recut one of the fronts, that's the way to go. Okay, so questions, comments?
I have a couple questions.
Uh-huh.
In both the state tape and the top stitching, how far from the cut edge are you placing the half an inch from the cut edge?
The state tape, you want the center of the tape to be on the seam. So the middle of the tape is about 1/2 inch from the cut edge for this particular thing. Now the top stitching, you know, you could kind of experiment, you know, and this is what I always encourage, making a sample before you commit to top stitching, because, you know, then you can see, okay, I want it a little further away from the edge. I want it a little closer to the edge, depending on this particular fabric and the method of top stitching. So that is something you can gauge on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the other question?
Okay, great. That was it. That was both.
Okay. So other questions?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thoughts? It is kind of fun to see you all glazed over like this. It's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know where to ask. I don't know where to start. And you know, it's like a friend of mine said, it's like eating an elephant. You just take it one bite at a time. And,
I have a question.
yes.
I'm hesitant to ask it because I'm sure it's
Go ahead.
something that has always bothered me.
Okay.
It's not intuitive to me. So when you're adjusting that tension, and I think I have a very similar Bernina that you do, Kenneth.
Yeah.
So, okay, you have it on the set line, which is that red line. That's supposed to be for normal sewing.
Right.
Going up or down, what does it do actually?
Okay. The lower the number, the looser the tension.
Okay.
And that's how I remember it. Lower and looser start with L.
Okay.
I know I need little things like that to hang it in my brain. So yeah. So I don't take it all the way down to 0. I think 2 on a Bernina is plenty loose enough. You don't want it to start catching on the hook or anything. You just want it loose enough.
The tension. You're loosening the tension on the bobbin or on both?
No, top
Oh, okay.
thread. Yeah.
Oh.
See, this is something I avoid. I have a separate bobbin if I want to play with tension on my bobbin. I have a separate bobbin case for that.
Okay.
You know, I take it in, I have my machine service, they set the bobbin tension, I don't mess with it.
Okay.
So if any tension, I usually play with the top.
Or do you thread through that little bobbin to, you know?
If I want to create a little more tension, there's that little hole on the finger on the bobbin case.
Okay.
Okay, so other questions? You know, for the people who, because see, I love and adore Berninas, but kind of a little back to the top stitching. That Bernina or the Singer 301A, or if you have a featherweight, it does exactly the same thing. I want my top stitching, if I'm going to use that, I want it to look the same from both sides. And as much as I love my Bernina, it doesn't like it. I have the 1230. I also have a 1260. I have an 1130 as well. I don't know about the newer machines. I have a 535. I must confess, I've sewn with it once. And I have the 535 because basically someone gave it to me. So I haven't really used that machine all that much, but so I know the older machines better. But you know, as much as I love Berninas, and I do, my machine, I would go into a burning building to save it. But for top stitching, the 301A is, and you can get them for not a lot of money. It's a great machine, and it's gear driven. It's not belt driven, so you could sew through masonite with it if you want to. I have not tried that. Okay, so other questions? Well, you know, I guess our work is done. Does anybody want to introduce themselves and
I
tell about?
actually do have one question just occurred to me.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So you've black fused your, maybe we'll get into this next week, but you've black fused your fabric. If your fabric isn't black fused, are you putting a little fusible behind where that pocket welt's going to go in?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think it's a good, and you'll see that actually next week when we put it to the when we put the welt to the body. Yeah, it's just a little square fusible. Okay. So
I have one more question also,
Yeah.
On the stay tape.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about the stay tape around the outside of the body, you know, the body fabric.
Yes.
Is that I have both a straight stay tape and a bias stay tape. I'm assuming because you're going around the corner, you're around the curves on the arm and the neck, that it's a bias. Is that right?
You want something that'll kind of shape around the bias. So I showed it last week. I'll show it again because it's good to see. This is what I use, and it's sort of a hybrid. It has. Everyone see that?
Yeah.
It has the center is it's maybe 1/8 of an inch wide, and it's like a taffeta ribbon, and it's stitched to a bias that has fusible on the back. So anything, you know, and if you just have a straight, you could actually cut it and overlap it in
Right.
sections, and that will do the same thing. But I'm really big on staying curves, especially neck and armhole. It just keeps everything from getting distorted. And I like staying it before I actually start, the welt pocket, you have to do a little bit of kind of managing and a lot of jumbling around. So staying those edges before you begin is going to save you heartache later.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So-
Kenneth, what is the brand of the stay tape you use?
I wish I knew. This is something I got in China,
Oh,
and this was, as I've said it before, the people in China were lovely. I didn't like going to China. There was a friend of my husband's, I thought I was covering it, because I was posting on Instagram, and she just looked at me, she said, "You hated it, didn't you?" I'm like, "Oh, I was hoping it wouldn't show." She said, "To most people, I don't think it showed, but you didn't seem real happy." I said, "Well, the people were nice, but the pollution was scary." And it was. The sky was gray, but it was like yellow gray. For 2 weeks, I didn't see any blue sky. But this is one of the good things I got out of, because I saw some of the students using it. So I asked my professor, my co-professor, I said, "How can I get my hands on some of this?" And she went on the internet and she said, "Oh, I've ordered you 5 bolts, and she's like, "It's this many, whatever." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that translate to in American dollars?" And she said, "I think it's $20." Okay. But if you use it's called Scenes Great, it's like a fusible tricot, that is not bad. That does quite a good job. Okay, other questions?
Kenneth, I have a question about the pressing tool that you're using, that you press the points over.
Yeah,
Where's a good place to get one of those?
Well, this one, God, I've had it for ever and ever. It was the June Taylor board. That was the brand name. And I'm seeing them reproduced on Amazon, and a couple of them are on eBay. Let's see. Yeah, here is the. Yeah,
Okay.
that's that. But it's I have 2 different ones. I have the one that's on my clapper, and I have this one, and just depending on what I'm doing, one or the other works really well.
Okay, thanks.
But see, I'm the big proponent of pressing tools. I love the pressing tools. Oh, Westy makes, Lisa says Westy makes on Etsy, sells one. Yes, worth the
Yes.
money. Okay,
Yeah.
so other questions? Well, then I guess our work is over. I'm going to hang around for a little while. So, if anyone wants to just ask questions or whatever, I'm here. So if you have other things to do, you may go do them. So class is
Okay.
dismissed for today. Yes.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, Janet.
Okay. Did you put stay tape on the welt? You didn't,
No.
did you? Okay, I didn't
No.
think so. I
No,
just, I
because
didn't
what
see
we
it.
did is we cut everything with the lengthwise grain parallel to the top edge, and that's going to keep it from stretching.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Oh.
I think people's brains are full.
Thank you.
So yeah, so now your homework is to go do this. So next week we'll install the pocket into the coat.
I'm a few steps behind, so I probably won't be doing this right away.
Okay.
I
this
am
is
very
great.
behind, but I have a great tan because I was in Florida.
Oh,
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Really nice.
well,
I want a tan again. I haven't had a tan since last year, and I look better with a little bit of color. And I look at photos, and I think, oh, I just really want that color again. So one day we're on our way. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, so it's a good thing.
it's coming. It's
Yay.
coming. Yeah.
Okay, ladies, it's been
Okay.
fun.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Here.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Okay.
you, bye.
Take care,
Have a
Kenneth.
good day.
Have a good day. Happy vaccine day.
Thank you. Yes, it's a good thing.
Have you seen Dolly Parton's cute little video she did?
Yes, I love her.
Aw,
I think
she's so
she's an angel
sweet.
in human form. I really do. I so
So
admire her.
adorable.
Yeah, what
I love
my-
her, and she made the.
You know what I love is that they said they wanted to make a statue of her, and her response was so, it's like, not right now, maybe after I'm gone, if you think so.
She's
But
so
I really-
genuine and sweet. I just love her to
And
death.
down to earth.
Yeah, I mean, especially given that she's been famous for like what, like for how
Yeah,
long?
her reading program is just great.
Yeah, I had my daughter and I have been doing her bedtime story videos. It's so
Yeah.
cute. So
Well, have a good day.
all right,
Bye.
take
Okay,
care,
you too.
everybody.
Take care now.